So, welcome back, everybody, to this afternoon session of our IP Summit. We heard this morning about the importance of the issues we're discussing today and tomorrow, and indeed that was underlined just before the break by those key findings, headline findings of that study on global fakes in trade. We also heard that progress has been made in strengthening cooperation since the first IP forum, but many challenges lie ahead, especially in tackling online infringement, because as we heard, the boom in e-commerce, rapidly advancing technologies, a constantly changing landscape, all posing challenges. Speaker after speaker underlined the urgent need to strengthen cooperations. And Christian Archambault said there were new opportunities to work together for the common good, especially in light of the decision to make IP infringement a priority again in the EMPACT network. Let's not waste this chance, said Peter Strömbeck. And Kirsten Jorna talked about a pivotal moment for innovation. She also said protection is key to foster that innovation. So we're going to turn our attention now to an area where it really is of absolute key importance. So, innovation, of course, essential for the transition to a low carbon economy. And protection of those innovations key to foster the private sector investment that will be needed in sustainability. In this panel, we're going to talk both about the importance and the role of IP in fostering and rewarding investments in sustainability, and some of the challenges and key areas for action as we look to the future. Let me introduce our panel. I'm delighted to welcome Ulf Hammarström, who is Director General of the Swedish Board for Accreditation and Technical Controls in the Ministry of Trade, Eiko Bode, who is Group Chief Sustainability Officer and Chief Compliance Officer at Phoenix Outdoor International. You'll hear more about them in a moment. And Sonja Churgo, who is Director for IP and Legal Affairs at Euroseeds. So as before, ladies and gentlemen, totally interactive conversation. I have some questions for our panel, but please, if you do have a question, click the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and please be as brief as possible so I can see who your question is for and what you would like to know. Let us jump straight in, and let's first set the context, if we could, Ulf. In terms of those massive public sector investments and private sector investments that we know are going to be needed to deliver the green transition, what role do IP rights play? How important really are they if we're going to become more sustainable?
Yes, thank you, Jackie. I certainly believe that they have a very key meaning for this. Risk and innovation needs to be somehow backed up and ensured by rights. So I think they are very fundamental. But coming from the broader quality infrastructure sector, I'd like, of course, to take that perspective as well, that IP presupposes that there is a regulatory framework which is broader to sort of cover around or bolster the IPs. And also a quality infrastructure in a wider sense, which can take care of this, market surveillance, customs authorities, and so on. And there, I think the really important thing that is happening now is the globalization and the digital marketplaces, which adds a lot of benefits, a lot of good with them. But they have also very big challenges in that it transforms responsibilities a bit away from the traditional market surveillance tools that we have towards the individuals, the consumers, and the customs as a public authority. There is more we need to understand. There is more we need to cooperate on to be able to be successful, to uphold IPs, but also the whole quality infrastructure as we built it.
So as you say, we have to move and change the way we're doing this because these tools don't necessarily work as well. We'll come back on what that means in a little while. I want to talk to you about trademarks and certification and the role that they play and so on. But let's get a perspective from industry. And Eiko Budd, if I could turn to you first in terms of how important for you as a company, tell us a little bit more about Phoenix Outdoor. How important you invest very heavily in sustainability. It's very much part of your DNA. How important are IP rights as part of that?
They are important indeed. Thank you, Jackie. Well, let me first try to describe a little bit the flowers we have in the Phoenix Outdoor bunch of flowers. So Phoenix Outdoor is a group of 6 brands and 4 retail chains, coming from a family-driven and also family-owned company group, developed into a stock listed group, but still having strong ties to the founding family of Fjällräven, a Swedish, well-known by their backpack and trousers company. But also in our portfolio, we do have a company like Primus producing stoves, camping stoves, but also those you use for expeditions. And of course, what we strive to do in all our endeavors all the time is to improve the footprint, the ecological footprint, but also the social footprint of our products. Now, without IP rights, we would not be able to do so in the way we would probably do it now, for various reasons. There are changes in technology, efficiency measures to be taken. You need an engineering know-how. If you make boots like Hanwag, or if you make backpacks like Fjällräven does, or if you make a stove. And yes, all this engineering know-how is highly important in order to be protected, in order to move towards more sustainable products. And this is basically how we have embedded it and why we think it's an important topic.
Thank you very much indeed. And Sonia, you too, Euroseeds representing, you're the voice of the European seed sector, another sector, particularly in terms of breeding, plant breeding, where there are a lot of family-owned companies as well. How important is innovation in your sector and IP rights in protecting those innovations?
Thank you, Jackie, for the question. Well, indeed, in our sector, at least in Europe, the sector is still very diverse, and we do have a lot of small and medium-sized family-owned companies, and many of those could actually not continue innovating without IP. So it does have a very, very important role. And actually, our sector is in the very core of all the sustainability goals of the Green Deal, because plant breeding brings a lot of answers and a lot of possibilities to tackle climate change, to improve biodiversity preservation, to have affordable food, to fight all kinds of issues that are on the agenda of the Green Deal. So breeders are actually working on developing new varieties day by day, and they have a very high innovation capacity. But in order to be able to keep on this innovation and to be able to keep in new solutions to tackle issues related to pests and diseases or very severe weather conditions, they have to be able to use all the tools which are available out there. And for that, they also need strong and enforceable IP protection. This is very key, and in particular for the small companies, the family-owned ones, this is really, really important, because otherwise they are not going to be able to stay in the competition. And we do strive for a diverse sector in Europe, and we would like to keep them alive and be able to innovate.
And of course poses particular challenges for SMEs in terms of upholding their rights and protecting their rights, because they don't have the resources that some others do to do that. So very reliant on enforcement authorities and support, something I hope we can come back to in our discussion. Before we go any further, I'd like to bring in a couple of impulse speakers just to give us a quick perspective on this issue. First of all, Ronald Brom, who is Managing Director of the European Anti-Counterfeiting Network, REACT. Ronald, a warm welcome to you. Your thoughts, if you would.
Well, thank you, Jackie. This is this is an issue which is extremely relevant for REACT. REACT is a body which enforces on behalf of the rights owners, enforces their rights, takes actions, processes the fake goods, and in the enforcement process, before getting the enforcement, we need arguments, we need support from law enforcement, or we need arguments towards a court in civil cases. And the sustainability and the need for rights owners to invest in sustainability is increasingly a super important argument to protect their rights and be able to enforce it. And where we traditionally refer to the harm to the economy, to the protection of the consumer, the sustainability argument is another important reason to enforce IP right. We process fake goods, and I can tell you that those people, the counterfeiters, they don't have an incentive to invest in sustainability. They don't, not at all, of course not. They only have to look like the products they want to imitate. And the result is that fake goods have a very low quality. Of course they have. Why would they invest in that quality? Why would they invest in sustainability? They don't have a reputation to lose. We process the goods and we can confirm these goods do not meet today's standards. I would like to go a stage further, to be frank. Enforcing is important, detaining fake goods is important, producing sustainable goods and protect those is super important, but we need to take care ourselves when we detain those goods, that we dispose of those goods in an environmental friendly manner. And that is not always easy. Here we really have another task to fulfill. We are trying to do that by dismantling the products, offering them to recycling industry, but we meet resistance when we want to cross-border fake goods, because not all the facilities to dispose of the goods are available in all the EU countries. And that is by times really an issue, because we still see too much incineration of the products, of the fake products throughout Europe. That has to stop. We have a joint task to dispose of those goods in a proper manner. And I appeal and there are facilities in the EU customs regulation to do that, to cross-border fake goods for the sake of recycling. However, as I said, we meet resistance. And I would like to appeal on the European authorities, use this in your toolbox. Make sure in your EU toolbox that we give the proper example.
Thank you very much. And probably an issue that is often overlooked, this question of what happens to those goods. Come back to that with our panel. Thank you very much, Ronald. Lots to discuss. Nicole Maréchal, who is legal advisor to the Director General at the European Chemical Industry Council, CEFIC. Your thoughts, please, Nicole.
Yes, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. So CEFIC represents the chemical industry as a whole in Europe. And of course, intellectual property is pivotal for the innovation of our company, whether it is patents, trademarks, and also trade secrets in combination or separately from one to each other. Counterfeiting may touch all type of products and substance. Mind you, 20 years ago when I was talking about counterfeiting, people were saying to me, no, it's not for the chemical industry, it's just for luxury goods. This is not the case. And we've seen it recently with the pandemic when we saw a lot of hand sanitizer, that's this substance you take for your hands, that were also counterfeited. And that's quite damaging. There are some data in HAPEX recently published. So I quite like the introduction this morning to say, let us not be naive. While we are looking forward to go for the Green Deal, when we are looking forward to improve many matters, in the other region of the world, you have groups of people that are looking for any type of opportunity to make quick money, and they will go for it. That's why having robust IP system is of importance, but getting enforcement and continuously continue to get enforcement and make it happen is also paramount for us.
Thank you very much indeed. And a question of how effective that enforcement is now. And Ulf was talking earlier about changes in the way that you do this, which are inevitable. But before I come to that, I just want to come back to Sonia and to Eiko. In terms of what you fear, if IP rights can't be protected, Sonia, as robustly as you have called for, there have been studies that have been done. For example, the EU IPO has looked into this in terms of the loss of turnover, the damage to your members' reputation. I mean, what is the scale of damage if IP rights are not enforced properly?
Well, the damage, unfortunately, in our sector, the damage is touching on the R&D budget. So if those damages cannot be recovered, or if there is no way to have better enforcement of our IP rights, and in our sector, it's mainly plant variety protection, which is a sui generis IP right, used mainly only by our industry. And we still have issues with enforcement possibilities, and unfortunately that is touching very hard the R&D budget of companies. And I come back again to the SME issue. For them, it's really a big problem. And it depends on the crops, of course, but there are some crops like potatoes where the profit margin is really, really tiny, and then they will be very hardly hit if they cannot have good enforcement possibilities.
So it's that competitive edge that it gives you by investing in innovation. If you lose that, because as Ronald said, the counterfeiters have no incentive to invest in sustainability. If you lose the competitive edge, then you cannot maintain those budgets. Eiko, for you, you're a company that's very committed to this. Others maybe less so. Are you worried that those who maybe are more reluctant to come to the sustainability table will be put off if they feel their IP rights can't be protected? You know, will they invest in the innovations? Because Sonia's saying there is always a risk to those investments if you can't enforce properly.
Yes, thank you. I think it is really depending a little bit on the industry and also on the amount of resources you have in your R&D budget and so on and so forth, and of course also of the commitment of the company. But looking into my industry, the outdoor industry, I would say we are all in the industry, and it's mainly driven out of the Central European and Nordic countries, are very much on the train of sustainability. So it's unlikely that somebody will derail or leave the boat. However, and that is the big however I have to say, is yes, that may be true for apparel, it may be true for shoes, it will be an entirely different topic when it comes to technical innovation, innovative products that you are basically designing as a technical provider for some technical usage. Be it you are a climber, be it that you are skiing, be it that you are basically truly on an expedition through which kind of climate ever, then you are basically forced to invest a lot into new technologies. And this investment is infringed or destroyed. And basically the return on investment is prolongated by some time if you are not able to counteract towards the counterfeiting. And that is what I see as a main thing. But on the other hand, of course, every counterfeit, and it was said already, Ronald put it pretty well, every product that's out there, the money is to be earned, and it will be a cheap crap product, to be very blunt, and a cheap crap product that you are hardly, or only if with some expertise, can distinguish from the true good, is something that poses a danger. Imagine a cheap stove made, yes, claiming a lot of sustainability claims. Probably the producer that does the counterfeit is not even interested in that claim, but nonetheless, and it explodes into the face of children playing with that. Or think about backpack you are basically buying for your kids. They should put into, when they go back to school, put on their bag and go to school. And it's the last summer day and they are wearing a very light t-shirt and so on and so forth. And the day they, even if they come back, they hardly can breathe and have itches all over the place because there's so much poisonous stuff inside because it was not done under proper conditions. Not even the material choice was proper. So all these are exposures to consumers and to users of products that are high risk. And I think already from the perspective of protecting human lives, we should be very alerted when it comes to addressing counterfeit.
And as you were saying earlier, when we talk about sustainability, it's ecological sustainability, it's also social issues around exploitation of labor, lots of different issues. But Ulf, can I come to the question of the role of standards of trademark certification? The EUIPO has done a study to look into the degree to which terms like green and eco are being integrated into applications for EU trademarks. And we saw steady rise in the first decade of the century, then a drop back, but then from 2015 onwards, a sharp rise, over 500 applications, I think, in 2020 alone, linked to the Paris Climate Accord. For you, how do you see the role of these trademarks, of certification schemes? Because as I think as I was saying earlier, no, it was Ronald who said, counterfeiters have no incentive to invest in sustainability. And they're not. What problems does this cause? How do you see green trademarks in addressing this?
Well, I see, to start with, I see standard certification, accreditation as steps on a quality ladder, if you will. The first step of having quality in your production or in your service is to do it in the same way, following a standard, and then you get a certificate. Someone certifies is the word that you are following the standard, and then on top of that, if you want to ensure that for example, a green certification is actually third-party assured, you can use accreditation as the sort of top step of ensuring the whole chain of quality. So I definitely see the increase that you see. I hadn't seen those particular numbers, but I think this shows that all the tools are very important. I think that it's all about a quality infrastructure system rather than the respective elements. But it's also on one hand about regulating to ensure that we don't have low class or unsustainable products and things like that. But it's also the demand on the market, that we need more information about these issues, and particularly about the responsibility you are taking when you are importing goods into the EU market. And there I think the public may have too much reliance on that. If a product is possible to buy when I'm in one of the EU countries, I can rely on it, even if I bought it on a global platform.
But if these certificates, standards and so on are so important, do you believe we have good enough cooperation now between government authorities and the private sector in terms of enforcing them? Because you talked about we need to move away from the traditional market surveillance tools, new roles for new actors. Can you expand a little bit more on what needs to be done in the face of this challenge?
Well, I'm not sure that we need to change the tools, but I think we can make them better understood, that we need more information and understanding so that we can be more informed customers when we are putting the demand to the marketplace. And I think we need to improve maybe the way we are working. It takes quite a long time to reach the higher levels of quality certification. And there I think we can become faster while still ensuring the same level of certainty by using modern technologies and so on. So I think we need to develop together both those who certifies and accreditates and the producers of services and products. So I think it's a lot about more cooperation to explore the possibilities of technologies, but also market change that customers are asking for different things today.
Thank you. And Akbar, how important to you, and same question to Sonia as well, how important are these EU green trademarks, certification schemes and so on to you?
Well, it depends on the product and depends on the scheme you're looking at, because there are various different types. In particular, if you look into the apparel, into the textile industry, and if you look also into the certification of technical products. And yes, they play an important role to some extent in order to make sure, for instance, that supply chains are decently working, that you basically do have that product in your products that you have basically purchased, and not something else is getting into your products. But I think the taking a step back is what we want to achieve is basically products to create products that are sustainable. And how do we define the sustainability in our industry is they have to be long, they should be durable, they should stay a long time with you. You should be able to repair them, you should be able to take good care of them, and you should be able in the end to recycle them either in a technical cycle, or even be able to dispose them off in the just normal compost, if you will. So thinking circularity, thinking whole supply chains, you need systems that make sure that you are on the right supply chain, that this product truly does what you've promised it would be doing. Now, looking at the counterfeiter who has no interest in anything, he can even forge labels, he can do this and that. And you're basically then again in a situation that you have two same or similar looking products in the market. One is resting on a shelf, let's say in some store in Europe, and costs 100 euros. And then you have another product that is only 10 euros and you can buy it online somewhere and you do not even know where it is. And then in the end, you're wondering, why is my recycler, why is my shop not taking this product back for repair, for recycling, for composting? And yes, this is the issue we have to cater for. I mean, my call would be, we need to be much more rigid when it comes to direct importing products from various markets outside the European Union, and have to look into what kind of damage is a consumer doing to the environment by importing directly, getting air shipped his product, probably as one single pack product into any destination in Europe, then passing the customs, who is overwhelmed and is not able to inspect everything they see. And then in the end, we're having caused some problem in our own system for the environment and for themselves.
Okay. Sonia, a word to the role of trademarks and certificates. And I know when it comes to circularity, and Ronald talked earlier about disposing of seized goods in an environmentally friendly manner, you have a concern in that area when it comes to plant breeding. But a word to the trademarks and certificates first, and then to that issue, if you would.
Okay. Well, for the certificates, of course, in our sector, maybe it's also a little bit special compared to some other ones, because we do have official certification as well, at least for part of the goods. So for agricultural crops, there is an official certification which is done. So you do have normally on seedlots which are put on the market in the EU an official certification label, but of course those can also be falsified, and we do see cases where this happens, unfortunately. But of course you can also have situations like similar to the ones that Eiko mentioned, where things are not imported to the EU for being used as seed, but for instance for being used as bird feed, but then in the end they are used and sold as seed. And of course, that has quite a lot of risk in terms of quality and also in terms of health issues. And maybe that links me to your next question on the disposal of seized goods, which I do understand all the issues that have been mentioned, and I completely agree with the idea that those have to be recycled or reused to the extent possible. However, we do have a concern as a sector, because in the case of seeds, infringed goods are very often coming with plant health issues. So issues linked to quality, but issues linked to plant health, and plant health is something which is very heavily regulated in the EU and very much kept an eye on by all the authorities. And of course, we don't want infringing goods, so seeds coming from illegal acts, which come with pests, and maybe also very pests which are not in the EU, and we don't want them to be spread. So planting those goods would be a disaster for the whole sector.
So we need we need a nuanced approach to where it is
Exactly.
appropriate. Interesting if anyone in the audience has a comment to this, but there is a comment from Mari Patullo from AIM saying, as well as the appalling quality and the difficulty in safe destruction, what's in it? That crucial question, says Marie. There is also the waste of resources in making the, quotes, cheap crap thing, I think she's quoting you there, Eiko, in the first place, making something that should never have been made. So the sustainability issue is so broad and big. But Eiko, a word, if you would, to this question, if you can, on the circularity. Sonia saying they're not always appropriate.
Absolutely, and I fully agree. This is exactly one of the concerns I have as well, because as was rightly pointed out, when we look into products that are forged, you have basically, if you have a normal technical product and it is, quoting myself now, cheap crap, then you probably have a product which is possible to recycle because the components are pretty easy to understand. It's metal, it's this and it's that, and disassemble it, and it can go into certain technical cycles. Much more difficult when you look into textiles, particularly if you look into children wear, if there is a heavy load of toxic chemicals inside, regulated under REACH, or even forbidden in the European Union, you all of a sudden have it. So what we have seen, for instance, is already from using, and now talking circularity within the European Union, using recycled materials from, let's say, 30, 40 years ago, we will find DDT in them, still traces of DDT, a banned product. How do we handle this? How can we make sure that that product doesn't pose a risk to any of the people who want to use it? But that is even, I think it's exponentially growing if you look into counterfeits and have exactly the similar issues, which are chemicals you don't want to see, pesticides you don't want to see, and as it was said also by Sonia, diseases you don't want to have. So this combination of things makes it sometimes really difficult to go the avenue of circularity. However, it should be the aim of all those good willing producers, and I'm meaning now the ones who have the IP rights and trademarks and so on, to be able to make products that are aiming for a circular economy in the future. And that is exactly what it should be.
Thank you. Ulf, I don't know whether you want to comment to this issue. I wanted to come to the issue of global supply chains in a moment, but on this point.
Well, maybe just to note that I think we want to be able to continue buying on the internet and buying globally. And we do not expect every second citizen to be a customs person. So I think we are faced with a problem that need to be approached from many different angles. One is, as I've spoken about, to educate and inform better what our role as consumers actually are if we are importing crap, which may be dangerous for ourselves and dangerous for the environment and so on. But also to work together with the digital platform owners to try to make sure that they don't bring in these kind of products, and also using, I think, artificial intelligence possibilities. I know they are being tested in market surveillance, so that market surveillance authorities can scan the internet looking for the bad products and so on. So I don't think there is a simple solution, because we still want the trade and the prosperity that it is giving. And so not an easy thing.
Yeah. And often we're talking there about imported goods, completed finished products, but also I'm just wondering from your perspective and looking again at the market surveillance and so on, in terms of the supply chain. And a question I'd really like to know from Eiko and Sonia in a moment, in terms of the global supply chain, we're not always talking about the finished product and the consumer being able to say, what do you see as the challenge here to make sure that we protect global supply chains from counterfeit ingredients? Because that links to Sonia's point about recycling. If you don't know, and if you haven't got proper verifiable checks on your supply chain, you don't know whether some of your product has been made from counterfeit goods. How do you see that challenge, Ulf? And same question also to Eiko and to Sonia.
Well, I guess you can use the same tools as we've been talking about, certification and accreditation, try to establish traceability within supply chains and how things are construed. So I don't know if there are new solutions to it. I mean, it's that side using those tools, using regulations, but also using responsibility in companies, expecting that as consumers.
And from your point of view, Eikbo, what do you do as a company to make sure that your global supply chains are not supplying you unwittingly, from your point of view, with counterfeit goods? And ladies and gentlemen, if we don't have many questions coming in, but if you have any comments or thoughts about the issues we're discussing, I'd also very much welcome them. But Eikbo, in terms of the supply chain and what you can do and are doing to protect your supply chains, because that also goes back to our point about investments in sustainability.
Absolutely.
It's all got to be sustainable, not just the bit you do.
Absolutely. And I think that is exactly the benefit of the company I'm working for and the company sizes we have, that you have long-lasting relationship with your suppliers. They are not popping up here and there, and then they disappear again. Our supply chain is basically pretty solid. And if I would take an average time I would spend of working with suppliers, it's 5 to 10 years as a minimum. And we have even suppliers who are together with us for 90 years. So that also builds relationship, it builds trust, confidence, and yes, of course, as Ulf said, then you have a lot of certification schemes, you have testing protocols, you have certain activities as a company which you are routinely doing in order to make sure that your supply chain is, in quotes, clean. That other topic of free trade and so on and so forth is absolutely valid, but then on the other hand, we need to make sure that we protect the European market from exposure to poisonous stuff or to dangerous stuff. And how to do that in a good way, I think we are still not 100% sure, and we have not yet the full set of tools. I could foresee, for instance, that if you make products that are meant for the European market and you have your transparent supply chain, because here you have basically the trade-off. On the one hand, we want protecting IP rights, want to protect our supply chain. On the other hand, we need to be more transparent about it in terms of sustainability, because that's the demand of the time, right? So if you have a transparent but rocket solid supply chain, then basically you can be sure at custom points, at police offices, even in the production country already, whether this is going to be a product that is infringed or counterfeited, or whether this is a product that comes from the rock solid original supply chain. And that already starts a dialogue. And we are in touch with all the different custom authorities and also with all the different police offices around the globe to exactly make sure that they understand our product, our production lines, and our supply chain, so that they can spot check when they do something, that looks fishy, try it out, then they are on spot. And this is also very helpful, good partnerships.
Thank you. Sonia, a thought on this from you as well. And also if Nicole or Ronald, as we don't have so many questions from the audience in this session, wanted to jump in with a reaction to what we're discussing, wave at me. Nicole, I see you. Yeah, both of you do. So Sonia, then I'll come to the two of you. And then I have one question from the floor I'd like to put to you. And I want to come to the crucial issue of cooperation and data sharing and so on. But Sonia, on this issue of global supply chains.
Yes, very briefly, because I think in our case, the supply chain is maybe not that much of a problem, because the ingredients that are being used in plant breeding by the companies is just other plant varieties or genetic resources, which usually come either from other companies or from gene banks, so mainly from trusted sources. But maybe in our case, there is more of an issue with the value chain, so in between the companies and the consumer, because in some crops, of course, there are many actors in between until the goods really reach the final consumer. And many of our companies have put in place tracing schemes in order to make sure and quality schemes to make sure that the actors down the value chain actually respect IP rights and only work with goods which come from a legal origin.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and then Ronald, you both wanted to make a remark.
Yes, giving another angle to regulation, it may be possible, and it is the case at the moment, that regulation command to phase down with certain substance or products that are placed on the market. We have an example in the fluorinated greenhouse gases. These gases are safe, energy efficient, but can have a high global warming potential. So these gases go in refrigerants, in air conditioning, and there is a legislation that was adopted in the European Union in 2014 to reduce these gases in the EU to 79% reduction by 2030.
Right.
So companies, whether they produce in Europe or whether import, receive quotas, annual quotas to put product on the market. These quotas, of course, are shrinking and shrinking.
But linking this to the counterfeiting issue?
Linking this to the counterfeiting issues, at the momentum the quota started to decrease, we saw illicit trafficking, including with counterfeiting. And so companies, importers, and also manufacturers are doing their share to diminish, and that's to transition to alternative with, of course, lower global warming potential. And immediately you see from certain regions of the world arriving illicit trafficking. And it's illicit trafficking, including some IP infringement.
Okay, thank you very much.
It's important to look at the global picture, certainly, but sometimes you see that these illicit trafficking are partly IP counterfeiting and partly just in not conforming to the EU legislation.
Take your point, Nicole. Ronald.
Sorry. Yes, thank you very much. I would like to touch upon the points raised by Heiko, and that concerns these inspections at the border. The problem is the high volume. Ulf also mentioned it, we want to buy. We all want to continue buying and have access to all those platforms and get all those stuff. But here we have an enormous issue because we are massively importing crap and products which are not sustainable. We have gone into much effort to protect our data. We should protect ourselves against this crap, and that is easier than it may sound, because there were very good initiatives in Europe for IP enforcement at the border, where there was a large scale of courier shipments coming in. For example, Coventry, but in Coventry, shipments from 2 to 20 kilos or something like that were intercepted, and then they were set aside, and then the rights owners were in the position to jointly with customs to do something against it, to protect ourselves against counterfeiting, but also to protect ourselves against polluting goods. And these type of initiatives will be expanded.
Thank you very much. Just a question relating to cooperation, because I want to come back to the central theme of our discussion, and you've all underlined the importance of cooperation in this area, as in all the others we're discussing. And just one thing that comes to mind is, how do we deal with the fact that infringement, so the enforcers of IP rights, and substandard products, the cheap crap, because Heiko, you're being quoted throughout the session, are dealt with by completely different authorities with little cooperation. Do we need to also, when we look at who needs to cooperate to tackle these issues, do we need more cooperation between those two arms, as it were, because of all the reasons that all our panelists have explained?
I'm sure we do. You are hitting actually a weak spot within me, because I'm responsible for coordination of market surveillance authorities in Sweden, and I very rarely deal with IP issues, because with us that is not for us to ensure or to enforce IP rights. So definitely I think we need more cooperation and looking at at this matter as a whole, which we don't necessarily traditionally do. So I'm sure we need more cooperation, both within countries with the different tools we can use, and between the countries, because we have a common market. And it is very inefficient that we all need to experience everything ourselves and so on. I mean, it's not that bad. The Commission is doing a lot, but we can come further in that, using our combined resources more effectively.
And it's interesting to me that you say, actually, at the moment, that doesn't really happen. Why, just to follow up on that, Ulf, why do you think it doesn't? And how do we build that cooperation? Who else needs to be round the table if we're to address all these issues in tandem, because they clearly are so interlinked?
Well, in the Swedish case, I think, because it's also my colleague Peter Strömbeck, who's the organizers of this, who is responsible for that in our system. And I think that it has not been such a large issue in Sweden. That's the way you organize the system. It wasn't that big, but I mean, as we are talking about now, it's expanding explosively as an issue.
Thank you. And Sonia, for you, in terms of strengthening cooperation in tackling this, who needs to be round the table and what can we do? How effective do you think cooperation is at the moment? Could it be made a lot better? And if so, your ideas, your suggestions?
Well, I think there is room for improvement when it comes to cooperation, and it's indeed a very important point. But at least in our sector, it has improved a lot in the past years, because before there was no communication at all between the private sector and the enforcement agencies, and it has started, and it's really mainly being done at the national level. And it's improving a lot. There is dialogue, there is trainings being organized. Because for us, the main issue was really to get enforcers know about our IP right and our goods, which are very specific, very difficult to recognize whether it is an infringed good or not an infringed good. So it's a very technical field, which of course enforcers have been struggling with a lot, but we see a lot of openness recently and a lot of improvement in this cooperation. So I would just say that we should continue on this same path and have a dialogue.
But you raise, if I could just follow up on that, Sonia, you raised an important point, because it was something I think it was Magnus Johansson talked about this morning when he was talking about specialized courts who have the knowledge in order to enforce in this area. What can be done? Is it more training? Is it more, because you're saying people don't really understand what they're ruling on, as it were?
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it's really a lot of training, I think, which is useful. And we have always been very envious of the trademark sector, which has specialized courts. And in our case, that is not the situation. And we have been really striving for specialized courts, but of course, understanding that it's a very small IP right and it's not very attractive for judges to specialize in. Nevertheless, we try to work together with judges and other enforcers, police, customs, wherever it is possible, to really train.
So when we talk about cooperation, like Eiko, same question to you about who needs to be around the table, how can we make it work better? And this judicial element, cooperating with judicial authorities, clearly for Euroseeds, for their members, is central. I don't know whether it is for you as well.
It will have a different quality, of course. And I think the what I was mentioning earlier is basically also showing the avenue we take. For us, it is very important that, first of all, the European authorities amongst each other are aligned and know exactly what they're doing. And yes, of course, we are offering to various, be it customs, be it whatever kind of authorities, training courses or information about what we are putting into the market, why we do it the way we do it, and what are the special features they can identify it from, and eventually help them to distinguish it from a counterfeit. On the other hand, it is also important that you are also having good relationships with the authorities in the supplying countries. It doesn't make any sense if you just leave Vietnam, China, and others out of the discussion. It won't be easy discussions, but we have tried to make sure that they understand that our interest is to produce in their countries, that we are there for more than just coming in the summer and leaving in the winter. We are staying for years and years and years and decades, and we want to protect our investment in that country as well. So they need to help us, and they have fully understood that and are willing also to engage in a discussion in how to identify, again, counterfeits, and are even helping us to identify the production sites, because having a counterfeited product somewhere on a platform doesn't help you to identify who was basically the origin of that.
And what's the key to those good relations? Is it that longevity? You say we're here for the long term, we're investing. Are there other key ingredients? And same question to you, Ulf, in terms of cooperation, how do we really make it work? What's the key to making cooperation effective? Eiko first and then Ulf.
Yeah, for us, it is definitely the long term, but also one other very important aspect. We are, since we are still not a huge multinational company, we are still a little bit of a medium-sized company, if you will. We are able to have interpersonal relationships, which means our CEO and myself, we are in the production countries. We are talking to the right people with the right know-how. And yes, our chief security officer is meeting with the head of police at Bangkok airport and is talking to them directly. It's not like we are talking through a letter of exchange or some big delegations. It is the direct interaction. That helps us. It doesn't work for everybody, but that helps us.
And that's interesting, Ulf, because you were talking at the beginning about market surveillance tools and the changing nature of this challenge. I wonder for you what the key is to really effective cooperation on enforcement.
Well, I tend to think that awareness of the problem, because it has had a huge influence, well, huge, at least a significant influence, I believe, in Sweden, when we have informed from the authorities of how many of the products which are bought on the net, which are of even dangerous for the consumers, and sort of bringing home the message that if you buy a mobile charger for €1, what do you expect? And do you realize the danger you are putting yourself in? If there is a fire, who is responsible with insurance, etc., etc. So I think awareness will at least take us a long way.
It is interesting because surveys do suggest that the public is gaining a greater understanding of IP rights, and when they understand them, they tend not to buy products that infringe them, and that there is a growing stigma around buying IP infringing goods, which didn't perhaps exist a decade ago. So progress in this area. One very specific question to you, Ulf. We were talking earlier about EU green trademarks. And a question, counterfeiters sometimes put CE markings on counterfeited products. Is this a big problem? And if so, how big is it? And what are the consequences of it? That coming from our audience, Ulf.
I mean, the CE markings are put for sure. I'm not sure if it's significantly different with the sort of the green products than others. So I can't really answer you.
And I mean, that raises another interesting point about whether we have the data we need on these problems, and what are we to, is that a big issue when it comes to green claims and so on, and where are the gaps in the data? But I don't know, Sonia or Eiko, before we try to draw some conclusions from this session, whether you, in terms of your own products and the counterfeited side of it, notice a problem of using trademarks in this way. Eiko, is it a big deal?
It is a deal. It's not a big deal, but it is, of course, part of the problem, because if you have a product that carries the CE mark or whatever kind of quality and inspection marks on it, and gives you gives the consumer, or in this particular case, in our case, the user of the product, the feeling that this is an okay product, it's in the market, it's there, it has all the markings, so you basically feel safe, and then it explodes into your face. That is an issue, and we have these cases. We had it with batteries made wrongly, and we had it with stoves made wrongly, carrying our logo, but of course, then when you look exactly at it, it is what I said earlier, it's cheap crap.
And have you had it with eco labels?
We didn't have it that much with eco labels, but you have, of course, the issue when you are tracing, let's say, organic cotton or recycled content materials, if you're not permanently monitoring that and having all the documentation readily available, then you may end up with having nothing like that. And that is less so the problem. It will come out as an issue once by random inspection, somebody makes a chemical test and then all of a sudden finds chemicals that shouldn't be there.
Thank you very much. Sonia, a comment to this?
I don't think we have too much experience with these labels. Maybe the only thing that could be mentioned is some sort of organic labels, which could be used in our sector. But I'm not very much aware of any issues that we had in that sense, to be honest.
Let me just read out a comment that's come from Phil Lewis on the floor. It is vital, says Phil, to have public-private cooperation and intelligence sharing. This has always been a swiftly changing environment, as we've been hearing all day, and we must work better together to understand the important end-to-end characteristics of counterfeiting. For example, many participants clearly work for organized crime, but they may not all be manipulated by organized crime gangs. They can be legitimate entrepreneurs involved in business-to-business relations. As a result, counterfeiting can become embedded in legal production. For example,
I think she's
Jackie froze.
Yes, she is, but she will come back. So maybe I can start talking about a little bit from my perspective, and then Sonia, maybe you have also something to add. From my perspective, looking at that topic, that is indeed a problem, and you have also the problem of backdoor production. However, that is an entirely different story, and you have to basically then monitor your own production in a different way. That means you need to know exactly what kind of ingredients you are purchasing, be it chemicals, be it materials in our case, and then put those materials into a context and relationship to what basically is the maximum you can produce from that. So you can basically control it to some extent, but I fully agree, you need to be always talking to your partners and to your, be it authoritative partners or private partners, in order to make sure that your job is done in a proper way. Sonia, maybe you want to add.
Well, no, I think I can just agree with you completely on what you have said, that of course talking to your partners is always very important, and in our case it's a bit like the same, that it does happen when it comes to IP infringement. It does happen quite often that it's actually done by partners of the company. So and it's in many cases it's not out of intention, but it's maybe out of unawareness. So yeah, discussions always help with the collaborators and partners to make them aware. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, sorry about that. I see you carried on beautifully without me. No idea what happened there. Momentary glitch. Aipo, your key priority. One thing you'd like to see in the toolbox.
One thing I would like to see in the toolbox, to be honest, if we are truly embracing the Green Deal, we have basically, it's 1.5 tools. I hope I can mention them. One tool would be, I would love to see that we are able to use spare parts and goods we want to put out into the markets, even that are already there for a long time, that we are able to have protection on the spare parts we are producing. Why? Because very often also those are infringed and forged and wrongly done, and in that you all of a sudden have a certain metal that you shouldn't have, not in the hands of kids, not even in the hand of somebody in a sewing shop. So that would be my number one wish. We would need to rethink spare parts and their IP rights. And the second thing I would love to see is basically, why not having, we are all aware of the issue of climate change, why not having a truly massive go forward towards climate protection by having the European Union making it very clear to those who infringe products and import goods through whatever kind of platform, hold the platform holder accountable for that. This is basically a hit on the climate we are having here, and we do need protection, and that means either taxation, tariffs, or whatever, but it has to have some sanctions.
Thank you very much. Ulf, you have the last word. A key priority for you in the toolbox and more broadly in terms of effective IP enforcement to link with the work that you're doing and make sure that we really do, as you've all said, how important this is in order to ensure those investments in the green economy. What's your key priority?
Well, I think if I would answer very broadly, a very well functioning modern quality infrastructure. But if you say one tool, which is more from a market surveillance perspective, we are very used to working in the physical world to go out to companies and look at products and buy them in stores and so on. Now I think we need to focus much more on working digitally, surveying a global marketplace, and to work together with those who are intermediaries between different markets in the marketplaces. So coming into the digital world in a way.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all three of you. Thank you also to Nicole and to Ronald for your interventions. And thank you, audience, for your mainly comments this time, but also questions. Lots to come back to in our discussions tomorrow. But thank you all very much. The audience can't thank you, so let me do it for you, for them on their behalf. Thank you very much indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving towards the end of day one of our summit, and we're going to get an overview in our last 30 minutes today of our discussions so far. So, it is my great pleasure to give the floor to Paul Mayer, Director of the Observatory at the EU IPO, to give us his reflections on the day's discussions. Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jackie. It was fascinating to listen to all the intervention and the presentations and the very well prepared interventions that we've had this morning and this afternoon. And as you can see, these guys can even do things without us. So they do really well, don't they? I would like just to go through a little bit everything that was said during the day. And I must say that we had a great start with Peter Stromberg when he said that look at the summit that we had in 2014 in London and look at now and look at what happened in the meantime. And he called it, there has been significant progress since London. I think indeed things have gone forward. I think that the situation is still preoccupying us. The joint study that we did with the OECD and was mentioned before shows that it's still 120 billion euros of imports of counterfeits into the European Union. Plus, of course, all the locally produced counterfeits in the EU, which we have not managed to quantify so far, but we're certainly working on it. Plus the piracy aspect. I mean, all these are incredible amounts of money that go around and that are, of course, very much to the benefit of organized crime, as our work together with Europol, with Eurojust, with Interpol, with all the other enforcement authorities also at national level have very, very clearly demonstrated. And for that matter, a number of people this morning have said it is so good that IP crime and counterfeiting have again been introduced in the MPACT priority, which basically are the priorities to fight against organized crime in the European Union. And indeed, it has been hard work. We have been working notably with the observatory stakeholders. Really, almost everybody was involved in that for the last 2 years, to contact national authorities, to contact the Commission, to contact enforcement authorities, to try and make sure that this happens. And as was very rightly said, we now have to demonstrate that we pushed our policymakers to make a wise and a good decision. That means that something must now happen. So having IP crime in the priorities of MPACT is not an end, it's a beginning. We now have to start and continue our work. We have worked a lot for now many years with Europol and Eurojust. We have an agreement with them. There are many actions every year, repeat operations, as we call them, in various fields of technology or markets when it comes to pesticides, for example, because we speak Green Deal every year. There's this Silver Axe operation where an incredible amount of pesticides, which of course are dangerous, very dangerous products, are seized. So all this has to be taken into account, and everybody mentioned this. Of course, for the Commission, the big priority is the economic system, innovation, investment, and they have brought forward this EU toolkit to ensure that the enforcement aspect of protecting our legitimate industry is as efficient as possible. And I can only, of course, repeat what our Executive Director, Christian Archambault, said. Of course, we first of all, we're fully aligned with the European Commission in their priorities and what they want to do. We do participate a lot, and we have been working in the same lines already for a number of years, and we will continue to work together with our dear colleagues from the Commission to make sure that that happens. And of course, this has all to be seen in coordination with another very important aspect, and I think that should be underlined and underlined again. The proposal of the European Commission for a regulation on the Digital Services Act is a major element. This, I think, will shape the future. In the discussions that we have had afterwards, it was all a question of should there be more responsibility or not? Right holders, of course, speak of more responsibility. People who are from the platform say we do a lot already, which is certainly a fact, that is true. Certainly the ones that we have invited have been doing a lot in the past. But even one of them said very clearly, yes, but we understand that for SMEs, it is much more difficult. Big companies, of course, can invest a lot of money into making sure they are completely clean, okay? And what the listings that they have on their sites, on their marketplaces, are only listings of legitimate products, and they work hard in that direction. For smaller platforms, this is much more difficult. So we need to do something. The answer to the whole question, should there be responsibility and or legislation or cooperation, is, of course, we need both. What should we have first, I think, is an outdated question. We are in the situation we're in now, okay? We have the proposal on the DSA, we have cooperation, we will continue to cooperate. And in the EU IPO, we do work with platforms, and we want to make sure that they have instruments also to actually really be capable of fighting ever more efficiently against the sale of counterfeit products. Counterfeiting is not the only issue. We had, I think, a great presentation of the minister who spoke with much pride, and he was right, of Swedish culture and what the Swedish culture has brought to this country, which is quite immense. And of course, what I mean with that is, of course, that we have to fight against piracy again. 2 years ago, we published a study on illegal internet protocol television, and our estimate was that the turnover for the pirates or the pirate sites is over 900 million euros, 910 million euros. It's considerable, and it is probably a conservative figure. We heard much higher figures this morning. So yes, we have to take things forward. Everybody on the right holder side says that we need more harmonization. We must make sure that the notice and takedown systems are more efficient. We must make sure that our judges make decisions as quickly as possible and as efficient as possible, that their injunctions are efficient, and that therefore everybody should work together and with efficient means to fight against piracy and counterfeiting. We heard the same thing from Steve Francis from the US. And I take this occasion to say just how well we work together with the American authorities. They have very close contacts with Europol. That's really the enforcement side, which is not what we do at the observatory, of course. We're not supposed to go into enforcement as such, but they work together very closely. And it is the only way, as everybody says, cooperation, collaboration is the only way by which you will obtain results in the fight against piracy and counterfeiting, okay? And at all levels and in all directions, okay? the public and the private sector must work together. Okay, the ones know what their rights are, the other ones are the enforcers. They are the only ones who are allowed actually to make sure the law is enforced, as the word very rightly says. Okay, we must of course cooperate between different administrations in the member states, in the European Union, and at the international level. We need to cooperate between international organizations and agencies. We cooperate and very happily so with the OECD. The result, one of the results you saw today, that's the study. Okay, this is knowing better, but we also work, of course, with other European agencies and Commission services like OLAF to make sure that we are as efficient as possible. So we must continue in that direction. We must continue to encourage also the marketplaces to do their advanced collaboration, as it was called this morning, to be proactive and to take things forward. Now, we must, of course, also look at the international level of things. It was mentioned on a couple of occasions. And of course, everybody knows now that, I mean, one of the main sources or provenance of counterfeit products is China and Hong Kong, 80%. And then it is obvious to everyone, I think, that we must work with these countries as well. A lot is done already. You heard about the cooperation agreement of TaxUD. You heard this morning. We work in the IP Key framework, which is an international program that is co-financed by the EUIPO and the Commission to make sure that we take this ever further. So that is a dimension that we need to continue to have, and international cooperation is absolutely necessary. The breakout sessions were fascinating. I went to the one on data sharing. And there we have again this hiatus between the people who think that the data protection is a problem for enforcement and those like a professor that we heard this morning who say yes, but it's important, etc., etc. Two things must be said. The general regulation on personal data protection is a major progress for our democracy in Europe. I think we must say that. But I must admit that every time I speak to enforcers, they say this is an additional difficulty for them, and especially when trying to or wanting to cooperate with others. The exchange of data between the agencies, between the directors general and the agencies, and between the private and the public sector are very difficult. We must definitely look into this with more detail and more attention, okay? By the way, the regulation of Europol is being reviewed in that respect. Nobody mentioned it this morning, but it is very important. And we must make sure that we have this balance between protecting the right of individuals and making sure that we are as efficient as possible. And there, again, in that framework, the know your business customer issue came up again. It was not the first time it was mentioned today. We spoke of value chain, we spoke of production this afternoon and where you get your products from the ones that you do. I think this is formidably essential. And basically this is something counterfeiters do not do, will never do. It is in complete contradiction with what counterfeiters do. We heard about CE labels this afternoon. Well, if you cheat on the product, if you cheat on the trademark, if you cheat on customs duties, if you cheat on taxes, why would you not cheat on the CE label? Okay, these guys do not respect any law. And this is why counterfeits are inherently dangerous, because you don't know what's in there. We had this story a few years ago of a tanker full of pesticides counterfeit. Nobody wanted it simply because everybody knew it was dangerous. It was a chemical product, but nobody knew which one it was. So how can you dispose of these things? So this is the major problem that we have. So we must continue to work also to help our SMEs and think things forward. There's one thing that I heard several times this afternoon in the mouth of Ulf, a little bit this morning, awareness. And I want to finish with this because I have 2 minutes left. If there are counterfeits for sale, that's because there are people who buy them, okay? Most of the people from all the inquiries that we make are actually tricked into, lured into buying counterfeits. They would not want to buy counterfeits, okay? Only a small percentage is knowingly buying counterfeits. That means we must educate people. And we have tried to do so, lately with our yearly campaign on the World Day Against Counterfeiting on 8th of June, where we try to give hints to the people. Of course, people should continue to use the internet. I mean, it's a kind of a freedom for them. So, but they must be careful. They should use only trusted sites. They should look to means of payments that are recognized, that are effectively available, etc., etc. And all these things we need to do. We are very active in a program on IP in education, where we have created a network, and where we want, actually, our ambition is very big. We want each European child at one moment or another to have been made aware of the importance of respecting what is the true thing, the true product, the true idea. Don't copy. Be careful not to buy things that are fake. And that is, I think, quite a big endeavor, but we continue to work on this. And I would stop here because my 15 minutes are over. There is no silver bullet. We need to do all together. Everybody needs to be responsible. Everybody needs to make sure that our enforcement authorities are armed as well as they can to fight against counterfeiting. Good laws and what the DSA will become is very important. And then, of course, awareness. These are the 4 things we must work on. And I'm looking forward to what's still coming now and tomorrow morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul, and thank you for pulling all that together so magnificently. And cooperation, collaboration is the only way. You said it very clearly, very forcefully. We will continue to build on that discussion about how we cooperate and collaborate better in our discussions tomorrow morning. But before we close, we're going to have one final keynote of the day.
Thank you very much, Jackie.
Hang on. Bear with me a moment, Jorge. So I am delighted to give the floor to Jorge Manuel Bento Silva, a senior expert in organized crime, drugs and corruption unit in the Directorate General for Migration and Home Affairs, better known in Brussels, of course, as DG Home at the Commission. And Jorge very kindly stepped in as a last-minute replacement for the Director General, Monique Pariat, who was very sorry that she couldn't be with us and is missing this event, but had an unavoidable pressing mission. Jorge, thank you so much for stepping in, and it's great to have you with us. Over to you for your closing thoughts at the end of day one.
Thank you very much, Jackie. Indeed, a privilege to participate in this meeting throughout the day. Fascinating discussions, and Paul Meyer's intervention just brought it all together in a way that I wonder what I can add to what was just said. It's indeed a privilege to be here on behalf of Monique Pariat. And what I'll try to do is to give you an overview of our perspective from the Home Affairs side on one of the growing aspects of the fight against counterfeiting and piracy, that is the organized crime dimension. We have heard about the growing risks posed by IP crime to our economy, to health, to safety, indeed, to security by numerous speakers this morning. And I would like to give you our perception of those security risks and as well of the strategic approach to counter. We have been aware for years that counterfeiting can pose significant threats to internal security being. For instance, counterfeiting electronic parts that end up in critical infrastructure, such as energy or transport systems, counterfeiting of automobile or aircraft parts, which represent globally a multi-billion euro illegal business, often involving organized crime groups, and can have fatal consequences. The COVID pandemic has taken these risks to even more tangible expression. I will return to it. It is time, therefore, we put behind the notion that counterfeiting is a harmless, even victimless crime. Counterfeiting kills. And the first message of 7 that I would like to deliver here today on behalf of my Director General is very simple. Counterfeiting is a security threat. Security. Secondly, as it is clear from the evidence provided by Europol, OLAF, EUIPO, counterfeiting generates high profits for organized crime groups. The 2021 EU SOCTA, European Union Serious and Organized Crime Threat Assessment Report, recently issued by Europol, presents a clear and sobering picture of organized crime in Europe. Transnational nature of organized crime, 7 out of 10 criminal groups active in Europe operate in 3 or more member states. 40% of them engage in more than one criminal activity, can be counterfeiting, but other things as well. They operate in a so-called network environment, cooperating with each other and with criminal service providers such as legal advisors, money launderers, and they are profit-oriented, and they have generated something like 139 billion euros a year, 1% of our GDP, which they use to infiltrate society and the legal economy. 80% of criminal groups use legal structures to carry out their activities. And I was just thinking about something you talked about, Jackie, about the embedment of counterfeiting in the legitimate economy. And indeed, that is what SOCTA says about counterfeit. When you read SOCTA, it says that the sale of counterfeit goods via online platforms has become even more prevalent and mirrors the increasing role of internet as the premier retail avenue for legal products and services. It talks about legal business structures are integral to the trade in counterfeiting goods, both as retail channels and to facilitate the movement of goods and to launder illegal profits. It talks about the links with document fraud. We were talking about Paul was just talking about labels and all the rest. I mean, it's not just the product that is counterfeited, it's all the documentation around it. Counterfeited goods are typically manufactured outside the EU and then imported for distributions in stores, marketing, or online. I will not read the whole SOCTA, but this takes me to the second and third key messages I would like to convey briefly today. The second one is that counterfeiting broadly follows the pattern of all other forms of organized crime. Whether it's infiltration into the economy or the use of internet, it's organized crime, it acts like organized crime, it looks like organized crime, that is what it is. Thirdly, counterfeiting is a global criminal activity which requires a globally coordinated law enforcement and judicial response. 2 months ago, on 14 April, building on SOCTA, I just referred, the European Commission adopted the EU strategy to tackle organized crime from 21 to 25. This was the first strategy since the Lisbon Treaty addressing organized crime in a comprehensive manner, alongside other specific strategies and action plans, things like drugs, trafficking human beings, but this is the comprehensive strategy. That strategy is comprehensive, it addresses all different angles of the fight against organized crime, from law enforcement, criminal finances, online crimes. It focuses on 4 priorities: boosting law enforcement and judicial cooperation, critical in this area; effective investigations to tackle criminal networks and high priority crimes, once again spot on; eliminate critical profits to fight infiltration on legal economy. I'll come back to that because I think it's critical; and make law enforcement and the judiciary fit for the digital age, which once again is very much relevant. As regards counterfeiting, the strategy is quite ambitious. It states that counterfeiting of products is a high impact crime, 6% of EU imports, give or take. It states as an objective, as a key deliverable from the Home Affairs perspective, the establishment of the toolbox against counterfeiting. It makes a clear stance for the accession to and ratification by EU member states, and possibly the Union itself, of the Council of Europe Convention on the Counterfeiting of Medical Products, MediCrime, given the COVID situation. It affirms the importance of the work that Europol, the European Anti-Fraud Office, EUIPO, are successfully conducting important operations leading to significant arrests and seizures of counterfeit products. And the strategy says, however, more needs to be done to reinforce operational cooperation to address counterfeiting. So what does that mean, more needs to be done? Europol has accomplished quite a lot in a few years in terms of capacity development, analysis, operational support and coordination. The Intellectual Property Crime Coordinated Coalition, IPC3, located at Europol and funded by EUIPO, has been established, and it is delivering. Monitoring and reporting online crime, raising public awareness, provided training to law enforcement, facilitating coordination and coordinating cross-border investigations. Very quickly, it produced results. After 1 year, 50 high-priority cases of intellectual property infringement were being addressed. This morning, I had the pleasure of attending breakout session 2, in which Sergio Quiro, who leads IPC3, presented those activities much better than I could, so I will not take too much time on it. So key to these successes has been the close cooperation referred by Paul Meyer between Europol, OLAF, and I'm most pleased to say in this event, EU-IPO. This collaboration has been and remains an example of a Europe that brings together knowledge and capacity in support of its member states at the service of its citizens and the economy, and effectively impacting organized crime. I will try to be quick, so I will not refer a number of operations that I have here on my speaking points in our sites, the Operation Shield, but just a few words on this, which was referred by Director General Jordan this morning. The Europol coordinated Operation Shield, 33 million COVID-19 related counterfeited medical devices, 8 tons of raw materials, 27 countries involved, 25 criminal groups dismantled, 700 suspects apprehended, seizures of large amounts of counterfeit medicines. As regards COVID, we have seen now, as you yourself were mentioning, Jackie, we are talking about 1.2 billion doses and 16 billion euros of scam attempts only related to vaccines. And we know about the fact that, unfortunately, when we were talking about personal protective equipment, some of our authorities actually fell into it. There was not just scams, they were attempts, they were really transformed into scams. So what we know that there is a high likelihood that this will continue into counterfeiting and vaccination certificates, whether emitted by the EU or by third countries. So the fourth and fifth message are the following. The EU strategy to tackle organized crime 21-25 targets counterfeiting as a high impact organized crime activity, and much has already been done to fight counterfeiting operated by organized crime. More is underway, but even that, as the strategy said, is not enough. The strategy also strongly articulates with and provides Commission views on how to enforce impact, which was abundantly referred by Executive Director Archambault, Minister Johansson a few minutes ago by Paul Meyer. Member states have now adopted the priority crime areas on which to jointly focus on the impact cycle 22-25. And the Commission services welcome, of course, the establishment of counterfeiting as a major priority crime area in this new cycle. And we are very encouraged by the fact that consensus to this effect was gathered among some member states, and also by the willingness expressed by numerous member states which wish to actively contribute to implement this impact priority. Too early to talk about specific cases, but there are quite a lot of member states very driven to take active role in this regard. And as Paul was saying, this is just the beginning. It's not the end of the process. We believe that indeed only a resolute involvement of competent authorities and stakeholders to design and lead impact activities will pave the ground to tangible operational successes on the ground. We too, Commission, are ready to support and participate actively in impact anti-counterfeiting activities, which will be implemented under the early operational action plans, and we will ensure the highest degree of consistency between impact, Europol, OLAF, EU-IPO activities, and the EU toolbox against counterfeiting, which is a joint endeavor of ourselves and our colleagues in DG GROW, to which we are totally committed. It is now important that the political will found in the Council can be translated at EU and especially member state level. Fighting counterfeiting effectively requires the mobilization of public sector, police, gendarmeries, customs, market surveillance authorities, judges, prosecutors, just a few, but also private sector, IP rights holder, intermediaries, both online and offline, as we heard during the entire morning and the day. So what the EU is achieving through close cooperation of Europol, OLAF, EU-IPO must also be put in place at national level. And that is key message number 6. close cooperation between public and private actors at national, EU, and global level is a requirement, a key requirement in the fight against this type of organized crime. As our impact colleagues keep saying, we are stronger together. And ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I will finalize just by saying that if we are going to tackle serious and organized crime, counterfeiting activities, we need to persevere, to stay alert, and to look ahead. Let me just give you 3 examples to conclude.
Very briefly.
Very briefly, 2 minutes. First, there is work underway we need to conclude. In order to address the sale of counterfeit goods online, we must ensure that competent authorities have the right tools for their investigations. Cross-border access to electronic evidence is key, and we are hopeful that the trilogue negotiations on the e-evidence proposals will conclude swiftly. Secondly, there are other things we need to start. Profits on organized crime groups are estimated at 110 billion per year in the EU, and only 1% is confiscated. That is not acceptable. The Commission will propose soon a revision of the legislation on the confiscation of the proceeds of crime. And finally, really to conclude, Jackie, there is even more we need to consider. It's only fair to recognize the determined political lead of the Portuguese presidency of the Council in the fight against counterfeit. In some regards, impact, this has already had effect. In others, such as the reinforcement of global control standards through the reinforced participation of the EU and its member states in Medic Crime Convention, progress is in sight. But let's admit it, as pointed out this morning, in other regards, such as the uneven level of criminal sanctions across member states, reflection must be pursued so that the most serious organized crime counterfeiting activities can be addressed throughout the whole Union as serious crimes and thus mobilize all the means available to the states and the Union itself. So let me conclude on behalf of my Director General with message number 7, which is, while much was achieved, we must avoid complacency and we need to think ahead to stay ahead of the trends. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jorge. You outlined there some of those key elements of the way forward. As you say, we need to think ahead, we need to anticipate. Both you and Paul saying this impact decision, important as it is the beginning, not the end. And Paul said earlier, now we have to demonstrate that what we pushed for was a good thing. It was a good and wise decision to do this. And you outlining there, Jorge, very clearly some of the things that now need to be done to answer that very question. So that brings us to the end of day 1. But as with Impact, this is not the end. This is just the beginning. Tomorrow we will resume. Please connect at 8:45 or so for a 9 o'clock sharp start when we are going to focus on new technology for IP enforcement online. We're going to look at 2 sides of this coin. What challenges do digital and technological transformations pose for IP protection? How are the infringers exploiting new technologies? But absolutely crucially, how can those new technologies like artificial intelligence and blockchain, how can they be used to step up the fight against the infringers? Lots to talk about tomorrow, more breakouts for you to delve into issues in detail. And then at the end, we will hear some, you mentioned the Portuguese presidency, we're going to hear from them, we're going to hear from the Slovenians, lots more to come. We're going to hear from Thierry Breton, the commissioner as well. So it only remains for me to thank both Jorge and Paul very much indeed for an inspiring close to day 1, to thank all our speakers for great discussions, to thank you for your inputs, your comments and your questions. I wish you a pleasant rest of the day and I will see you tomorrow morning, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as we say in English, for our 9 o'clock start. Thank you all very much indeed. Bye-bye.